Apparently I'm talking now. Twice. Ignore that. So, does this look familiar?
Yes. Yeah.
Basically nest boxes. Old woodpecker cavities in trees. You typically find woodpecker cavities in dead trees. In town, most of those tend to get removed. The power company doesn't want dead trees hanging over all the power lines, time to come down right for Memorial Day weekend when they absolutely don't want to come in and fix Rockford.
Yeah.
So, dead trees tend to get removed. There's not as many of them. Putting in nest boxes essentially helps replace that missing habitat piece. Now, if you're putting in a nest box, if you put in one nest box in your yard, it tends to get a lot of competition. Every cavity nester will compete for it. That includes chickadees, nuthatches, titmice, wrens, tree swallows, several species of woodpeckers, and bluebirds, and of course everyone's favorite house sparrow. So what can help with this is if you can put out a few different ones. Some years ago, I think it's probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, my mom said she wanted to get bluebirds in her yard. So I actually put up 5 bluebird boxes in their little yard. They do not live with a huge yard. It's like maybe 1 or 2/3 of an acre. So it's a little yard in a, I mean, 1 or 2/3 of an acre is actually a big yard, but
Yeah.
comparatively it is not. They did not get 5 bluebirds, but what they did get was an alleviated competition to the point where the bluebirds could get a box. So they'd get, chickadees would usually get 1, wrens would get 1 or 2 sometimes. Bluebirds would get 1, sparrows unfortunately would get 1. But it opened up the competition so that the bluebirds could sneak in there. And they had nesting bluebirds for quite a few years. So you can get them in town. And it's one that you can go for other options. It's if you wanted to try for something a little bit more elaborate, eastern screech owls. They use, they're large nest boxes, but they use nest boxes. Great crested flycatchers, which very likely not a lot of people have actually heard of that one. But it's actually a very cool bird. It's got kind of a brown, olive brown back, a yellow front, and it nests in cavities, including large birdhouses. And it does nest in town. I actually once upon a time had someone play me a sound recording and they just went, what bird is that? And it was a cardinal, but right at the end of the recording, a great crested flycatcher called. So there's a lot of birds you could go for beyond eastern bluebirds. Eastern bluebirds are a good base to go for. It's something that a bluebird box can get a wide variety of birds. They will nest in town and they need help. If you want to try something more elaborate, the larger boxes are good. One I would really not recommend would be purple martin boxes, mainly because purple martins, their population is low enough that that would be a huge expense of time and money for probably no martins. If you're willing to try for it, go for it. They do need help, but it's very likely going to be a lot of work, a lot of money, and no martins.
They're both really difficult to take pictures of because they're very small.
That is the exact same thing that you said last time.
Down. Wonderful thing to shoot from.
Are we out of sync here?
Very good.
Doesn't want to go back.
Created a monster.
It had a favorite spot that it wants to stick at. It doesn't want to go anywhere else. Some resources if you want to try for bluebirds. Nestboxbuilder.com. I love this website. If you like to make your own birdhouses, this is a great website. Some excellent designs on there. Those are actually the designs that we used at Boone County Conservation District across our sites. I also recommend that one, even if you're planning to buy your own nest, to just buy a nest box, not make it. This one is a good website to give an idea of what a good design is and improvements you can make. Most store-bought birdhouses are built around how many can we get in a box to ship? So a lot of times a very common flaw with store-bought birdhouses is the hoods are too small. So even a store-bought birdhouse, I've only ever seen a couple that I wouldn't just stick another roof on top of it just to make the roof bigger. Cialis.org, Cialis, Ciala is the Latin name for bluebird. This is, when I was first going to make an attempt for bluebirds, this was the Bible for me. Very useful website. Nestwatch.org is the Cornell Labs website. They not only have birdhouse plans, but a lot of good information. Nestwatch.org has plans for birds that you've never heard of and didn't realize that uses a birdhouse too. So if you're thinking, no, bluebirds are for the regular people, that has the plan you're looking for. That is pretty much going to wrap it up. I do want to mention one thing real quick. This talk was mainly put together with the idea of helping people who already have their habitat base started in their yard, and they're kind of looking for how to continue it. If you have not done anything habitat related in your yard, and you're just thinking about it, or you just bought your first little pollinator garden, then what I don't want this to do is make you say, oh my gosh, am I doing everything right? I better stop for 10 years and make sure I nail everything down. If that's what you're worried about, then just forget everything I said. Just start somewhere. If you've already got a pollinator garden going, that's a good base. If you're thinking about doing it for the first time, like, oh, I don't know what to do. Well, start out with some coneflowers, put those in. If this is something that you can use to expand on what you're currently doing, that's great. If this is something that you're starting to get like, oh no, am I doing it right? Then just forget it. That's pretty much going to wrap up what I have. Are there any questions?
So to get the bluebirds, you have bluebird houses, and you should just get more of them up, and hopefully they'll have a chance to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to keep other critters out of bluebird houses, or when do bluebirds stop nesting?
So the question is regarding keeping other animals out of bluebird houses and how long is their nesting season.
Yeah.
So nesting season for them is actually quite long. They can have as many as 4 broods a year. If it's an experienced pair, they can start nesting as early as March, and they can continue through September. They'll really just crank out the nests. How to keep other animals out of it? One, I would recommend pole mount your boxes with a baffle on the pole. A baffle is basically a big metal pipe. It keeps other animals from climbing up, or does a pretty darn good job of keeping most animals from climbing and trying to get to the young. Because yes, a raccoon basically sees a nest box as a Happy Meal box. Now, how to keep competitor birds out? That's a little bit more difficult. If it's house sparrows are non-native. They were introduced from Europe around the 1850s, 1870s. Thank you. Those you can kick them out. In fact, there's in-box traps. There's all sorts of things you can do to help keep your house sparrow population under control. If it's not a house sparrow or a starling, you gotta live with it.
Okay.
In some cases, that's not a problem. To be honest, if I didn't get bluebirds because a chickadee took it, okay, I'll live with that. If I didn't get bluebirds because I got a tree swallow, awesome. If I didn't get bluebirds because I got a house wren, okay, that one's a little bit more annoying.
Yeah.
The house wren population, a lot of people don't realize this, but the house wren population exploded. Their nesting population went very far south due to the popularity of little cutesy backyard birdhouses. And so that guy does not need any more help. I always recommend to people, do not buy birdhouses that have 1-inch diameter holes because nothing except wrens can use them. 1 1/8 at least allows chickadees. So yeah, if house sparrows are the problem, you can exorcise their nests, and if you can put them in an in-box trap, you can trap them and remove them.
Is there a good website for ag identification?
Science.org is a good one.
Okay.
We live on the edge of a small farm, Arlington Cemetery Farm.
Oh, yes.
I'm afraid to put up a bluebird house because of what they put in the field to spray. I'm just afraid to attract them. I used to feed them, and we monitored them on the forest, I would love to have them. I just don't want to attract them to where there might be poison.
That is an issue.
Repeat the
However,
question for the people at home.
regarding putting up bluebird houses in areas that use extensive pesticides and other chemicals. In an area like that, to start with, I might consider contacting the cemetery and seeing if they're still doing that. There are a lot of places that are, a lot of public and more public places like that that are getting away from that. I was surprised to learn even some golf courses are getting away from over chemicalizing their properties. So it's possible that they are doing that. The other one is that there's a lot of places that are going to have chemicals. Like you see bluebird boxes frequently out in farmland. And I've been crop dusted in farmland. So there's a lot more out there, and those readily have bluebirds in them. So it might be one I would consider.
Doesn't mean it's not hurting us.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not hurting them, but the alternative is they don't nest anywhere around there. So what I would probably do to start with is contact them and see what are they applying. If they're toning back on that, then it might be a non-issue.
Anybody, ask if anybody on Zoom wants to unmute themselves and
Are there any questions from Zoom? If you do have a question, you'll want to unmute first. Hold off on Zoom. We have a question from the crowd.
You speak of planting your yard with respect to a remnant or some wild area. How far away would you say is close enough to consider it?
I don't know. That the yard that I mentioned that had they found a population of Virginia waterleaf that had waterleaf mining bees, and putting in waterleaf they managed to get some. Those two are about a mile apart. The yard that had the Protandrina antarsis, that is a prairie bee. I have no idea where that came from. That yard is not close to any prairie I could find. Closest thing I could squint at and maybe turn it into a prairie is a really crappy, kind of, sort of, might have areas that if you squint are restorations. So I'm going to say farther than people think. But we'll say, for the sake of putting a number on it, a mile would be a good range.
What are the 3 parks in Rockford that have high-quality habitat?
Well, specifically speaking, have
Repeat the
high-quality forest habitat.
Yeah.
So these are high-quality woodlands. There's actually others that aren't woodlands, they're just other types of habitat. But Alpine Park, Alpine Park, if you look at an aerial, it has like a big chunk that extends out to the east. If you go look at old aerials of Rockford, that was there back in the 30s. It has a very, very nice mix of woodland flowers in there. And if you pull into that site, when you pull in the entrance, you go down this lane, you come around a corner, and then you start heading out. Right at the edge of that U, that little grassy hill is covered with spring beauties. It's actually beautiful. It's pink with spring beauties. I was there last year in May, I think, and I was taking pictures of unequal cellophane bees coming in and out of the nest. And I heard something next to me look over, and there's a summer tanager that was going into the nest holes pulling the bees out.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't care that I was there. He's just like, oh, hi. So Alpine Park is one. Reuben Aldean Park is another. That one, again, very high quality woodland. And then one that not too many people know about is Hall Memorial. And if you've never heard of it, join the crowd. I'd never heard of it before, I think last year or the year before either. It's just off of West State and does not have a parking lot. It's kind of hard to find, but if you go look up Hall Memorial, I think I have it on eBird, and Park District obviously has it on their site. But I've heard about that from quite a few naturalists. Once you get past the belt of honeysuckle around the outside, it's astounding how well that site opens up. And the amount of flowers, the amount of plants in there is astounding. But those three are three very, very high quality remnant woodlands, and they're all pretty much in neighborhoods.
Is iNaturalist a bee identifier app?
iNaturalist is an everything identifier.
So if I found a bee I didn't know what it was, it's probably all of them.
So if questions regarding what iNaturalist, I'll briefly go over iNaturalist, what it is and how to use it. iNaturalist is a database for everything alive. So you take a picture of something, upload it to there, quick, no pets, no humans, no cultivated plants. Just remember those three. Upload it on there, put a base ID, your best guess. You know, if the best you can do is just bees or butterflies, do that. A mistake some people make is they upload it with no ID, and so it goes into the unknown pile. Last I checked, the unknown pile had 300,000 observations in it. So it's going to be a while before they get to yours. So if you put a base ID, it then goes to the people looking for those observations. If you upload something identified as bees, then people like myself, or Dr. John Asher, or Kyle Price, who's a bee identifier down in, I think he's in Iowa right now. But some very, very good bee identifiers will go through, identify those as low as they can. Some bees cannot be identified as species from the photos that we see. But more than people think they can be identified to species level. This not only tells you what it is, but puts it on a huge database. Last, I think a few weeks ago when I checked, iNaturalist had 130 million observations on it from all kingdoms. Plants, animals, fungus, protozoans. There's even people who upload bacteria. There's not too many bacteria identifiers to use iNaturalist. Good for them. And researchers use this data. I believe there's over 1 million bee observations from all over the world on iNaturalist, and there are quite a few researchers that are using this data because we're seeing things that we couldn't really see before. One of the advantages iNaturalist gives is the entire database is up for review all the time. Specimen collections, like if you go to one of the large museums or universities that has a sizable insect collection, those don't get reviewed very often. So if there's a mistake in there, it can sit there for years. In iNaturalist, every single one is up for review, so the database tends to stay cleaner. Because if we find a mistake, we can correct it like that. Basically, is take a picture, upload it, and then just kind of keep an eye on it. If you upload something and you're not getting any activity, no one's identified it, you can find someone to ask. Just you can go and say, okay, well, I want to know what this bee is. So explore bees in Illinois. And you can see who the people are who do a lot of identifying in Illinois. And you can tag them. You can say, hey, can you tell me what this is? And they'll come along and give it their best ID. That kind of explain that more or less?
Yeah, I didn't know if there was a specific app or iNaturalist would do.
iNaturalist.org is what's used for the PC. The app, I think it's just Seek, but I still use a flip phone, so I don't use that.
Okay.
And I'm not joking, I still use a flip phone.
Joel, what is the lifespan of a specialist bee? Is it just the duration of that plant?
Actually, it's very short. Most bees don't live very long. Figure a couple of weeks to a month for some of the bigger species. Yeah, bees are not terribly long-lived things.
Do you know what plants a rusty patch bumblebee would prefer?
Rusty patch bumblebees are bumblebees. Bumblebees are generalists.
Oh, okay.
Some of the ones that I've found them on are things like Culver's root. They love wild bergamot. And wild bergamot's nice because it's easy to grow. The interesting thing though is if you ever see a rusty patch bumblebee on wild bergamot, they are always nectar robbing. What nectar robbing means is they don't get down the corolla and shoot their tongue down and get the nectar out. They get on the base, they chew a hole in the base of the corolla, and they drink it out from that side. So they don't actually get pollen from that, they're using it as a drinking fountain. They love cup plant, and if you are one of the brave people who's willing to put cup plant in your yard, I'd love you. I did that, and if you were going, oh, coneflowers spread too much, don't do cup plants. They put up the stalk 8 feet tall, with the seed head at the top of that, and then in the fall, the stalk falls over and drops the seed head 8 feet from the base. But cup plants are great for bees. The seeds are amazingly popular with goldfinches, and the leaves actually come off the stalk kind of like little cups.
Yeah.
When it rains, those fill with water, and they offer a water source. And it's also really good cover, because they grow very, very dense. But a lot of different plants will attract rusty patch bumblebees. If it attracts bumblebees, it very likely will attract rusty patches.
So I've heard the key to the rusty patches have early spring flowers that the queen.
Yeah, most bumblebees, the queens emerge in April and May. Now, rusty patch bumblebees, I don't exactly know when they do come out. I've photographed them in early May, in early April, and I've photographed them in May, and I photographed them in June.
The queens.
The queens. So, and actually for a very long time, up until 2020, none of the internet databases had an April record of rusty patch bumblebee until 2020. There is benefits to having everyone stuck at home with nothing to do.
Yes.
After that, we started seeing more of those. I think it was largely because everyone went, oh, hey, maybe we should get out early. But yes, having those resources out in April, May, June, that's one of the reasons why that's so important, is that's when the bumblebee queens emerge from hibernation. And that's when they need those resources.
So sedges, willows, early blooming. So thank you very much.